Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm Keith Downey, your host, and joining us this morning is Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff, a homeschooling mom, independent scholar, and author of the new book, Mother to Mother, Spiritual and Practical Wisdom from the Cloister to the Home. And with a PhD in American literature and classical rhetoric, Mary Elizabeth brings a unique perspective to her work. She's also a proud alumna of the University of Dallas and has shared her insights in publications like Crisis Magazine, Modern Age, and Law and Liberty. To top it off, she and her husband are living a homesteading light lifestyle in rural Pennsylvania. Good morning and welcome to the show, Dr. Mary.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for joining us. I think it's safe to say that mothers have one of the most challenging jobs ever. I see it with my wife. She barely has time to herself, let alone time for, really nice, solid, meditative prayer. I don't know how she does it, but how can mothers model contemplatives in the busy and often noisy life of the home?
Yes, well, so in my book, Mother to Mother, I interview 5 different monastic communities about questions like that, that pertain to motherhood. And the reason why I decided to do that was because they are mothers too, right? They have a monastic family in the monastery, and it's not just like a term of endearment that they call their mother superior mother. And so I thought to myself, well, let's see what the mothers in the spiritual life have to offer to the mothers in the, in the lay life, specifically on the aspect of contemplation, prayer, things like that. So how can we model nuns? Because they have all the quiet and we have all the noise. And the advice that the nuns gave me was really amazing, because it turns out that contemplation is something that you can find if you look for it, no matter where you are. So, for instance, one of the nuns said, if you are up really late at night with one of your kids and, they can't get to sleep and therefore neither can you, you can seek to enter into God's presence, which is, contemplation, right? By looking for the face of Christ in your child. So that turns a sort of, unpleasant reality of parenthood, the fact that kids don't typically seem to be able to sleep through the night, into an opportunity for contemplative prayer, because you aren't able to, pull out the rosary and the this and the that and the that, in that moment. At least I can't. But you can still use that moment to enter into the presence of God by seeking his face right there in that face, right in front of you. So it's little things like that that the nuns suggested to me that you can do in order to find contemplation in life, right? Because God throws things at you as part of your vocation, right?
Right.
So in the home life, we might think of things as distractions from prayer, like, gee, if only, the laundry was done and the kids could play outside by themselves, and maybe I'd have 20 minutes to pray. And that type of prayer, when we can get it, is amazing. But we don't just need prayer in those sort of formal, dedicated settings. We can also pray in the parts of the day that are part of our vocation, right? Doing the dishes can be a time for contemplation. Listening to our kids try to learn to pray themselves can be a form of contemplation, right? So it's looking for these little moments throughout the day where we can enter into God's presence.
Yeah, that's such incredible wisdom from mothers, the contemplative mothers there. That's so cool. Wow. You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm Keith Downey, your host, and we're talking to Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff on how mothers can model contemplatives in all the chaos of home. Now, obviously, nuns and mothers have very different demands upon their time, especially when it comes to prayer, right? We were just talking about that. What are some of the ways that contemplative prayer can influence the way mothers pray with and for their children?
Obviously, nuns have, very set hours of prayer, But one of the great benefits of that, one of the nuns told me, is that, the repetition that is a natural part of the monastic life. They pray the Psalms, either, some orders do it 5 times a day, sometimes do it 9 times a day, depending upon their particular monastic traditions. But the sheer repetition of prayer, she said, allows them to get sort of, or forces them to get a sort of earbug, right? So she will find herself humming part of the Psalms throughout the day. And she said that can be a moment for additional prayer, right? So when prayer finds you, don't dismiss it and use it, right? So I have actually started kind of in that spirit, trying to play or recite a single psalm. We can't go through the entire Psalms, but anybody has time for one of the Psalms. So we picked Psalm 1, and my kids and my husband and I, we recite it every single day before bed. And we've started to memorize it just, by the sheer amount of time that we say it. And it turns out that my kids have started getting earbuds. And so, just the other day I was doing the dishes, thinking of something completely different. And I suddenly realized that my 3-year-old is, playing with his Duplos, and he's reciting part of Psalm 1. Just a half a line, and several of the words are in the wrong order. But he is praising God in that moment without him even really knowing it, right? He's just, this thing that we say all the time, he's now saying it while he's doing his Duplos. And I, listening, I could either laugh and be like, oh, that's cute. Or I can laugh and say, oh, that's cute. And then myself enter into that prayer as well. And, that holy earworm, if you will, was a sort of call to prayer for both him and for me that we didn't have to really work for in that moment. We didn't even have to intend in that moment. It came to us as a gift. And the way that we turn it into a prayer, as opposed to just an earbug, is to respond to the gift and to use it consciously. So it's little things like that that we can, these little sort of tricks of the monastic trade that we can kind of take in tiny form, and we can use ourselves in our home life in order to pray, both with our children and for our children.
Wow. Yeah. Our word of the day is imitation or imitate. And that's so interesting because, you're mentioning mothers imitating the contemplatives to pray in moments that you wouldn't typically know when to pray. And then children see that. And so they're imitating you. It's an interesting kind of link when it comes to, these two vocations. You wouldn't think necessarily would have things in common, but you can certainly link them together. Wow, it's fascinating. It's really easy to see some of the differences between these two vocations, motherhood and, the contemplative motherhood. But how are the vows of spiritual mothers similar to the vows of married mothers?
Right. This is actually sort of what inspired me to write the book, was that when you look on the two vocations from the outside, they look like they're the polar opposites, right? These women over here have vowed to never have children, never have a husband, to live in community. These women have vowed to have a husband. They have vowed to welcome children, should God, give them, and to live in the family, right? So what do they have in common? It turns out they have everything in common, right? And the most important thing that we have in common is that we sort of both trace our vocations to Our Lady. She is both the original nun, right? The perpetual virgin who contemplates God, continuously. So she's the original and the perfect nun, but she is also the perfect mother, right? She didn't originate the vocation of motherhood, but she perfected it. And she was literally crowned sort of the queen because she is the mother, right? And so we trace our vocations from her. And so the nun's goal, the mother's goal at the end of the day is to model Our Lady in her motherhood. So the nun models Our Lady's motherhood as well as the lay mother does, because we all have and the church and many saints have reiterated this time and time again, all women have a call to motherhood. It doesn't necessarily look the same for every woman, right? I have 5 kids. We homeschool. It looks very different for me than it does for, the mother abbess down the road of the Benedictine monastery. But she is a mother just as much as I am a mother. And she is called to nurture her spiritual children. And because of that, there's a lot of confluence between the two vocations that, traditionally Christian women are called to choose between, right? So, because of those confluences, that universal call to motherhood, modeling Our Lady in our vocational life, we have a lot that we can sort of benefit from each other. And nuns have the great benefit that they've all had a mother themselves, right? They have been raised in a family life, or they've, seen successful, wonderful mothers among their friends, or their, even if it wasn't ideal perfectly for them in their own home life growing up, but they have seen lay mothers around them as they were raised before they became nuns, and then even afterwards. So they have the great benefit already of understanding our vocation. And so the book was sort of like, okay, let's open the door to their motherhood so lay mothers can benefit from their perspective on motherhood.
Wow, that is incredible. I can't thank you enough, Dr. Mary Elizabeth Cuff, for joining us this morning. And if this has edified you, this conversation, you really enjoyed it, you can find her book, Mother to Mother, Spiritual and Practical Wisdom from the Cloister to the Home, at tanbooks.com. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Let's keep spreading that truth and joy together. God bless, and make it a joyful day.